This is Ari Koretsky, and welcome to Jews You Should Know, introducing the broader community to interesting and inspiring Jewish men and women making a difference in our world. Some are already famous, some not yet so, but each is a Jew you should know.
We are back with another fabulous episode of Jews You Should Know. Is there a Jew you should know in your life that you'd like to highlight, honor, have featured with a shout out on this program? Email jewsyoushouldknow at gmail.com. jewsyoushouldknow@gmail.com. Send me information about that person today. Also, very exciting, you know that we've highlighted dailygiving.org many times on this program. An incredible charitable institution that brings together your individual dollars from all over the world and funnels them towards worthy charitable causes. Well, they have just crossed the $9,500 a day mark, marching towards 10,000 daily. So that is extremely exciting news as well. Please go to dailygiving.org and add your contribution today. And speaking of today, we're very excited to highlight Miriam Leah Gamliel. She is an expert in the arts and has done a tremendous amount to create creative outlets for young religious women in the world today. Excited to hear her story, her own personal religious journey, as well as what she is doing with her unique gifts to give back to the community. A reminder is always to follow us on social media at Jews You Should Know, spelled out fully on Instagram and Facebook. Jews You Should Know with the letter U on Twitter. Comments or questions, as noted earlier, jewsyoushouldknow@gmail.com. Subscribe or follow wherever you're listening, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whichever destination you use for your listening enjoyment. And now to our conversation with ATARA founder and OU Impact Accelerator awardee, Miriam Leah Gamliel. We are here with Miriam Leah Gamliel, the founder and director of ATARA, which we will learn all about what that stands for and what that is all about. And how are you today, Miriam Leah?
Baruch Hashem, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the show. Thank you.
Such an honor and a pleasure. Very excited to have you, to meet you. We were just joking that, it's always fun to meet somebody after you hear their name, because the name that appears on your email sounds like this really funky, exotic, sort of ethnic name. And I made all these assumptions about your background. And then I saw you on screen and it was a different name. So it's great to actually see you, not live, but close to live, and really get to see who you actually are. And very excited to have you today. So Miriam Leah, tell us a little bit about where you are from. What's your background?
So I am from Pittsburgh and grew up conservative, actually at the Tree of Life Synagogue.
Wow, incredible. So that must have really been powerful when that tragedy occurred.
Right. I did. I wrote an article because I just had to process it. That was literally my hometown and synagogue that I, grew up and attended Hebrew school, and I knew the ins and outs, right? You don't actually go to services as a child in synagogue. You only run around the building. So, knowing that building really well. And so I grew up learning, conservative level Hebrew with a bat mitzvah. And I was involved, I guess, the points of my childhood that are, most relevant is, I was definitely involved in the arts in terms of every Shabbos. I would go to musical theater, right? Like I did not call that Shabbat. I would take the bus downtown and take classes in musical theater. And then, so, to a certain degree, I sort of have to give back because, I gained all my education at the expense of, traditional Judaism. But, my impression of Orthodoxy was, toilet paper rituals. They had some sort of strange ritual with toilet paper. Now looking back, they obviously, had to like rip their toilet paper in advance, but, it was hard to understand, why they were doing what they were doing. And I felt very empowered as a Jew. I was a very strong Jew in terms of going to Jewish summer camp and being in a culturally Jewish community where if they didn't go to my Hebrew school, I sort of made the assumption that they went to someone else's a different Hebrew school.
I assume were you living in Squirrel Hill?
Squirrel Hill, exactly.
So that's interesting because that's almost like a little, let's say, like a ghetto of sorts. I mean, there's tons of Jews walking around. You have a huge Orthodox community. You have a huge Chabad community, obviously also Orthodox, its own kind of subset there. And so your exposure when you live in Squirrel Hill, I imagine, was pretty significant, even if you personally were not Orthodox.
No. Interestingly, as you know, there's also a very strong JCC. Like there's the JCC community simultaneously overlapping. So what's great is that when I did become observant, I didn't have to move to the Jewish community. The Jewish community they're all overlapping. And so I could live in my, in my own home with my parents and walk to the Orthodox shul, within the Eruv, relatively speaking. My house was outside the Eruv, but, it was still walking distance. And so that, but the Pittsburgh community is absolutely phenomenal. And Pittsburgh people marry Pittsburgh people. I don't know how much you know about Pittsburgh, but it's really this, we... Shout out to Pittsburghers listening, right? We're just to have this like community centric. It's a city with intelligent people, with intelligentsia. There's, universities and medical centers. So it's an educated community, but a very small town feeling where, people are just very non-judgmental, and, it's a wonderful community. So I grew up with that. I think also that probably impacts my views on others and the world, and coming into the Orthodox community and being surprised to find anything other than non-judgment, and, because that to me was the, given circumstances, is that you just are warm and accepting, and but also the upbringing, I think, did lead to my interest in Judaism, in the sense that I was never turned off. I was always engaged in being Jewish. And then, at some point you have to ask yourself, what does that mean? And am I being my best self? Right. I'm at like a sort of in being predisposed to these deep thoughts. You sit around and say, if I was Chinese, I'd be learning calligraphy. Like I'd be saying, what does it mean to be Chinese, and how can I be more Chinese? Right. So I was Jewish. So I said, how can I be the best Jew? And so it led me to being open. I wouldn't say that then prompted me to go and learn independently, but I, simultaneously with the musical theater trajectory, I eventually studied musical theater. And because I had been studying musical theater, I was not permitted to study French. I somehow had this dream of becoming Grace Kelly, and actress who became a princess. And so I was like, great, that's me. All right, I'm gonna learn French, and then I'm gonna go follow Grace Kelly. Unfortunately, nobody wants to follow Grace Kelly per se. But this dream of becoming a princess, right? So, but then I had too many arts credits, and so I wasn't allowed to then, take the junior year abroad to France, because I hadn't studied French, and so sort of consolation prize, I picked Israel.
And where were you in school at the time?
I was in Penn State in a musical theater conservatory. And so I just, picking Israel was just sort of, if I'm not going to go to France, I might as well learn about Judaism. Back at tracking to high school, I had also gone on a teen tour. So I felt like I had toured sufficiently. And so when I was in Jerusalem, I just said, let me absorb Jerusalem. It's a holy city. Let me understand. I actually dated an Arab, and so I should say Hashem, like religion saved me from being a statistic of Yad La'achem, because I said to him, I'm Shomer Nagia, right? Like now I'm Shomer Nagia. I had just learned about it.
Just explain what that is for the audience.
That means not touching. To me, this was this big joke, and I would like sort of poke people and say like, can't touch you, you know, can't touch this. But it was funny to me, but it was a good way to break up with someone. So I would say, you know, I'm so sorry, you know, now I am religious, which I wasn't at the time, but I was learning about the ideas. And so it was a good way to, but chomonagia is just not touching the opposite gender until marriage. So, so I was just, you know, being exposed, right? You're sitting in Jerusalem. I'm easy prey. I was open to what rabbis had to say. You know, I'm here in college. Rabbis are going to come and say, let me teach you about Judaism. And I'm like, great. You know, like I have a mind. I can evaluate for myself what you're saying. I don't think that you're trying to brainwash me. And if I did, I would, you know, smell it, I think. And so I'm open. And so what really changed it for me though was the Moshav band, right? Like the Moshav band gets credit for my carving, you know, like for all my Shabbos, like goes to the Moshav band. I'm sure there were rabbis along the way, but they opened this door because the band wore kippot, right? I had never before seen someone that I could relate to on a personal level that was also religious. So religious people were religious. They looked different than me. They didn't have the same lifestyle or the same life choices as I did. And I was comfortable with who I was. But here was someone that I admired from my, you know, from my qualifications of like what's cool. You know, they were great musicians and cool and funny, and they wore kippot, right? So that gave me the like open door to that religion can be for anyone. And it doesn't change, you know, your social habits, and, you know, it's, you're allowed to be a musician, right? So they modeled that. And so then the other part of becoming religious was academic for me. Every paper that I had to write was an opportunity to investigate Judaism versus non-Judaism. And whatever it was, I was like studying Bernard Shaw, and I don't know how that paper related to Judaism versus non-Judaism, but somehow I figured out a way to do my own exploration as I was studying academics. And so each paper that I wrote, you know, gave me another layer of, you know, an answer to a new question. And to that degree, I also eventually studied Jewish history, and that was really, again, a consolation prize for not, you know, I wasn't welcome to study the rabbinate. I wasn't welcome to be a cantor. I wasn't welcome to be a, you know, superstar performing artist, which now the game is changing. But at the time, you know, nobody was saying, great, let me give you a contract for your singing career as a woman in Orthodoxy. And, you know, I could sing to my children. That was it. And that was, and to a certain degree, that was the experience that I was having, where my performing arts were on two, and religion were on two different trajectories. So as I was a performing artist, and as I became more involved in Orthodoxy, then I stopped performing. And so as I was learning more about religion, then I started being more religious, but so the paths, the trajectories crossed. And so when I became religious, my performing arts stopped. And so that was what I understood from the rabbis and rebbitzins around me, mainly rebbitzins. And I don't think that they intentionally were trying to put a wet blanket on me, but it was what I gathered from the little hashkafic drops of, you know, you can sing to your children, but several key moments where when I eventually did choose to go to seminary, the Hanukkah play and the Purim play just weren't enough, right? I was already directing and coordinating these productions, but it was farcical. It was like, you know, how funny and stupid can you be? Not how, if you have talent to really be able to showcase that. So I put together, this is sort of pre-ATARA, I put together a talent showcase for all of the seminary girls that I knew had talent. So from my seminary and Neve and wherever I heard someone could sing or dance or act, you know, I called them and I said, I heard that you have talent. Our seminary is going to make a fundraiser for our seminary, right? Like it was just about, there wasn't really a purpose to it other than having this, you know, event where we could use our talents in a way that could, you know, showcase the talent, benefit enjoy, have something for the community to enjoy and give, charity, right? Give tzedakah. And so at the end, right, it was so successful and we raised 1,000 shekels and it was like, whatever the case may be. And the Rebbitzin said, I'm so happy, right? Here's 1,000 shekels for your yeshiva. Isn't that great? And she said, what's great is that now you know your priorities and you can be in class tomorrow. And I was like, are you like, what? Just shoot me, like just stab me right now, stab me in the heart, like what? And so I just felt so unappreciated, right? Like, so like, not, wow, you have these gifts and they can be used. And so something was just wrong. And then I went back to Pittsburgh, and then the other sort of like powerful moment for me, like sad moment for me, was there was a Chabad, right? And they, and bless their heart, they do a lot of good. But, one of the Rebbitzin asked me, she heard that I sang, did I want to perform for the girls? And then she said to me, it can only be Nagunim. And I just cried. I don't know Nagunim. I don't sing Nagunim. It's a different genre. If you want to sing Nagunim, like, it's just, you can harmonize to them and, play them instrumentally. And maybe someone who can take a nigun and turn it into, someone can do a remix and put a techno beat to a nigun, but they're not as singable as musical theater was for me, and that my training and my genre, and I can't just like take a nigun and like belt it out in musical theater style. So I just felt like I didn't even have any material to perform. So what's the point of having people who want to showcase in a women only setting, but I still have no material to perform. So I was stuck. And but that just pounded me down, right? Like I just felt, where I don't have a niche here. And so for 10 years, sort of like betrays my age, but I actually was just underground. I became a librarian. And because to me, it was like an extra educational space without homework, right? I didn't have to like actually do lesson planning, but I could stay in the like learning milieu, like a space. And also libraries are gorgeous, right? They have all windows and sunlight. So there was the romance. I love being in a library. As you can see the books behind me. I love, my secret passion is just reading. So I became a librarian, and no one knew that I was a performing artist. And I was learning about, at the time, right, I was becoming more observant and living in Passaic, New Jersey, and trying to also navigate whether I was Chabad or Litvish. I had cousins that were Lubavitch, so they assumed I was Lubavitch. And then I attended a Litvish seminary, so I had that influence. And God forbid I should be modern Orthodox because they're the den of sin. I don't know, you go for the more Litvish perspective is a little bit like, you take someone who didn't, who ate bacon, and then you like say that there's nothing less than, right, like, absolute shaitel with, like all of the bells and whistles. And so there's like no in between, because those are the people doing outreach. So, shout out to modern Orthodoxy to like go into outreach, and then, people will find that middle ground, which eventually hashkafically, it's just been a long journey, I would say. And I do live in a Litvish community, and, I switched my kids to Beis Yaakov at this point, but
I just want to back up for a second, because, you're going through this whole journey, but I'm listening as, as somebody who's involved in Jewish outreach, and as somebody, and just as an observer. Didn't you feel resentful at these times? And why didn't you just walk away? Like, when you were still at a formative and probably fairly tenuous point in your development, and you were getting all these sort of messages that were counteracting a core part of your identity, why didn't you just walk away?
So 2 reasons. One is, so it's actually the first pasuk in like Rashi or something answers this on Anochi Hashem. And I feel like that answer, not knowing that answer at the time, but the reason that I chose to stick with it is sort of that answer, which is, if God if God exists, then he's God, right? Like, I'm not God, so I don't know. I can't have a dialogue with him about why he does certain things. I have to trust that if I'm not God and he's God, then, right, like that means that he's God. He knows. And so there's this submission to God knows. Like he knows why he said what he said, and eventually maybe I'll know more. But if he says that I can't sing, right? So like the rabbis and the Rebbitzins were representing God to me. That was God. Whatever the Rebbitzin said, that's what God said. And so if God said that I couldn't sing, then God knew what he was doing. And eventually I would understand it. And the other reason was the journey I had made was my choice. Like I was not influenced by anyone. I do not, I'm a creative person. I do not like to be told what to do. Someone's going to come and tell me what to do. And I'm going to say, let me think about it. Let me understand it. And I'll make the decision myself. It's just sort of, inborn to the creative mind to need that autonomy. And so I did not, even kashrut, this was a very slow process, and skirts, maybe it was like a 2-year process that was, will I eat shrimp? Okay, I'm going to choose not to eat shrimp, but I'm still going to go to a non-kosher restaurant. I just won't eat the shrimp. Will I go to the non-kosher restaurant? Okay, maybe I'll choose a kosher restaurant, right? Like it was just every decision. So by the time I got to be observant, I wasn't going to judge the flossing and the toothbrushing on whether I wanted clean teeth. If I bought into the picture and I didn't like to floss my teeth, then I still bought into the picture. That's the sort of metaphor that I had to use for myself, that there's certain parts of an experience that aren't satisfying and could be irritating and harder than others. But if you buy into the bigger picture, then you just live with them, because there's too many other things in life to worry about than to, start changing, finding things wrong. And if you just look at what's wrong, then you're just not gonna, be able to
I just think
on.
it takes a remarkable amount of humility on your part. Many people don't take that tact of, well, there's this bigger picture and I just have to sort of sublimate myself to that. They'll find other ways to rationalize, contradicting that which the parts that don't sit well with them. And and I think it's understandable from a human perspective, but I do think it takes a lot of humility to assume the posture you assumed.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, go in so many directions from that, because it's a pattern that I feel like I definitely, I would say that my pattern is not to go down without a fight, right? Like my first instinct is, well, I don't know what my first instinct is. I have, because I do tolerate a lot. I don't want to rock the boat on a certain level until I feel something has become crystallized and clear there's a problem. And then I can say, there's a problem that's not being addressed. And then my sort of like stage 2 is, why isn't this being addressed? And that's really essentially what happened with ATARA is, like there were so many people that I met along the way who had also given up careers and, or said that they sang, or, whatever it was, maybe not so many, but everyone that sort of had a background, we were all sort of in the same boat where we were religious and we had a background in the arts, and, there was nothing to do about it. And, so we would sing together. Let's say Sudash Lishit was always this time where I felt like, girls could get together and harmonize. And so that was something that we sort of found each other. And that I would say actually was the start of ATARA, because the person that I ultimately became like my partner in crime from the beginning until now, we just sang together at Sudash Lishit. I would go to her house and we would just harmonize. And so it was from that relationship that was born something larger, a need. And so it was from that relationship, and just eventually, right, I ended up on the Upper West Side. It was Shabbat, and what were their names? Wolansky at the time was the Rebbitzin, the associate rabbi and Rebbitzin at OZ. And she said, why don't we start a theater club? And I happened to be at the table, and, really no one knew. I don't know if she knew my background, and I was like, oh, pick me. And then, so right after Shabbat, I said, like, what about that theater club? Let's see. No one stepped up. No one was interested, right? And I said, listen, I'm not letting this drop. I'm interested. So if no one else is interested, can we make a musical? Can we make a musical for women? And she was like, great, whatever, the shul was behind it. And so I held on, it was, at first, you start to make your own musical. We're going to make a Jewish themed musical. And then, I went through to get rights. And then I was told I wanted to do Guys and Dolls, like on the Upper West Side, adapted, right, for, the Upper West Side relationships. And Guys and Dolls licensing said, no, this is no adaptation rights. So I was like, okay, writing a new musical is just going to be too difficult. Let's pick one. We picked a sort of women's musical, and we got adaptation rights. And but through this process, women from New Jersey and Queens and Brooklyn, which are, if you don't know the New York area, could be an hour and a half away drive, were coming in for auditions and rehearsals. And the performance was fantastic. And people said, wow. And at that point, this was like having a meeting with the stakeholders, like who is interested in having a community of people who love the performing arts, who are from women and girls. And we were like, I went back to, at the time I was living in Boston, and that's where I, knew this other woman, and I got her involved. And so anybody that was interested in a community, someone came from Israel and said, I'm interested in a community of the arts. I was just doing something in Israel. So I said, great, we have a whole community of people. I just did a musical. Let's gather the troops. And so I took the train from Boston, and I meet her at Starbucks, and I thought there was going to be 25 people. I don't know. I thought she was organizing this big meeting, and I was coming in from Boston to be a part of it. And I was the only person that showed up. It was me. I came in from Boston, and it was me and this girl from Israel. And so I was like, okay, great. Let's have a conversation about the need for the arts in the Orthodox community, for women in general. There's a serious problem. People are I'd also met people who were artists who had defected, right? So they felt that they had to choose. It's either Judaism or arts at that time. Now the choice is, that's not the case, Baruch Hashem. But at that time it was, either I want to study theater, I want to be a dancer, I can't be Orthodox. I want to be Orthodox, I have to let go of my dance background, my theater background, and my singing. So I just knew that there was a problem and a need and an interest, right? You had all these women from this musical. And so she said that she wanted to make a show in New York, but she was going back to Israel, and could I make the show for her? And I was sort of like, maybe, wasn't exactly what I was thinking, but, I'm going to go back to Boston. She said she's going to call Stern College. She was a graduate. And I said, listen, if Stern College says yes, that they'll give us a space, I'm in. If we have a space that I don't have to deal with the logistics, I'll gather the performers. And so lo and behold, a few months later, I was just working as a librarian in Boston, and she emails me and said, Stern said yes. So I just turned to everybody that I had been in touch with, and I said, we are on. Man, we are making a women's concert at Stern College, and call everyone you know, right? Like, get everyone that you ever heard of that sings, that dances, that who has a background in the arts, get them now. And so we had people flying in from, LA. Robin Garbos was making films. And so she was like, great, I'm about to debut my first film. Let me show it at the conference, or whatever it was, let me show a preview. It was just this gathering of artists. And so to me, it was not only the show, but it was having a meeting, right? Like, what are we? Who are we? What do we need? What do we want? What does the community need? What does the community want? What can we do? I felt that, right? That together we can somehow be greater than the sum of our parts. And so what is that? What will we do together that we haven't yet found. And so everybody said, listen, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And, it wasn't like we didn't need to create a camp or create anything local per se, but we wanted to create a community. So we said, fine, let's have a conference, right? We'll bring people together in one bubble for teaching, learning, performing, discussing, and meeting each other. And so I just sort of fell to the task of like being an administrator, right? I had the administrative side and the analytical side to me, and the directing side, for what that's worth, a sort of skill set and being able to take multiple pieces and put them together. So I just sort of decided that that it would be, I've never produced a conference before, but how hard can that be, right? You just sort of like map and you put in the talent, and then you make a flyer, and then you advertise it. Like what's a no-brainer, right? It's like a production. You're just putting it together in the way that makes sense, for like if I was going to a conference. And to a certain degree, as a librarian, I had been involved actually in the Jewish Libraries Association. So backstory secret that, the Arts Association is sort of based on the library community. But, I was involved as a participant in some board meetings and some, chairing committees and seeing how a conference is run. And so I just had I imported that experience, and I just applied it to the, religious arts community. And at the time, it wasn't just women. I was actually interested in men that were, doing Shomer Shabbat work. And so it wasn't, and the board, I sort of like invited people to the meeting that were men involved, but I feel like it was just man overboard. Like they just wanted to throw me overboard. It was like women only, we want to talk with our hands, like even at the meetings, right? It was very important that it was a safe space for women. And it wasn't that men attended the conference, but I would have a man panelist, because I thought that he brought his experience in starting a Shomer Shabbat initiative. And so that was the first conference. And it was also Stern College had liked what we did the first time, so they invited us back. But by the second year, we had already committed, we had already started advertising. Stern had said yes to a second year. And at that point, Bernie Madoff did his whole, game changer, and Stern College, lost their funding. So we were just like an extra frill, and it just didn't make sense for an outsider to be using the facility when they needed to pull back. But at that point, you're so deep in the same way that I was so deep into Judaism, when I had a bad experience, you have to make a choice. You're so deep in. Do you quit because of the obstacle? Or do you say, it's an obstacle, but I'm already here? Like, what do I do? Right? You do have to make a choice. But I guess at those points, I feel that sometimes when I'm so involved, that I need to say, well, what are some other alternatives? Right? It's not black and white. It's either great or horrible, and you have to quit. You have to, at least I feel like we have to be able to say, that's great, that's a concern, that's a question that's raised. So the issue is not therefore quit. The issue is, how do we address that concern? How do we come up with solutions that could like eliminate the problem, or avoid the problem? And so like we were in New York. This wasn't like Alabama. There were 300, 500 theaters available and dance studios available. And it just sort of opened up the Kaylee for like the rest of the world, and like taking dance classes and putting them in a dance studio, not in a classroom at Stern, instead of being within the confines of, just whatever space was offering something to us. We could rent space if I priced it, if I did crunch the numbers and did ticket sales and donations and whatever, then we could rent real space in New York City, dance studios and theaters. And so that's what we did for a few years.
And this was for what? This was for classes or for more conferences? Like, who were you servicing at this point?
Conferences. It was too much to do more than once a year. And it was just a once a year. Yeah, it was just different people were getting involved. And so we were thinking about different spaces in New York, but it was really just once a year. And people were asking, right, what's in between? I can't live like this once a year, right? Like, I need something constant. And so my contribution was just making a newsletter, right? Like the monthly, this is what's happening, to sort of keep people connected and inspired. Because if they saw, hey, there's a dance school opening in, Chicago, that gives me inspiration to open my dance school in Michigan, or whatever the case may be. And so that it was like a sense of things are happening, even if it's not where I am, I can feel connected to others, and I can feel inspired, and I can be motivated to do something new myself. And that was really the goal of that. And then you can also see over history, you can see how it grows, and like things that start and new things that start, and what trends, if you do like a retrospective of like the newsletter, you could really track the growth. And so it's interesting, but that was the way that we stayed together. And the other thing that I did was I just had to say, you go and do it, like sort of empowerment. I'm not going to start your dance school, right? I don't live in Chicago or whatever the case may be. You are empowered if you dance and you live where you live, and you came to this and you feel that you're internally empowered and encouraged and supported, and we can support you and just be there for you as a community. And if you have questions, and if someone has precedent, you can ask them, we'll connect you. But you need to go and start your dance studio, or teach classes in your basement, or record your songs, right? Record your music. You have a beautiful voice. You need to go and record your own music. I can't record it for you. So it was more just being this source of encouragement. And that was sort of like phase one. And at that point, I don't know if you want to know like my life story. I just was still single.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So I was just producing these conferences, and I just felt like I have to pull back in a sense that if I'm so, right, like a guy would be suggested to me, and I'm like, I don't want to waste my time unless he's really a good guy. This is like, these dates are just wasting my time. I have so many important things to do. I don't know, and, it was like, I couldn't fit in proper dating. I don't know, I just wasn't giving it the attention that it needed. And I needed to say that, by the way, I don't know, you could see the expression on my face, but just for listeners, like I'm facetiously saying, like important, right? Like I'm not saving people. I'm not a doctor, right? My mom always points out, like, your work can take a break for a day if you need something, because you're not the president of the country, right? Like you're not, people's lives aren't depending on you. It was more like maybe emotional support, but it wasn't, so it wasn't important work in that sense. And to a certain degree, that's actually hurt me, because I feel uncomfortable asking for tzedakah, frankly, like, right, if we need to be a nonprofit and raise money, there's hospitals that need money to save people's lives, and we're right. Like, so it is an interesting position to be in, where people do need the arts and creative expression. But I would argue that it is also a lifesaver, in a sense that people either defect, like without it, right? People's lives, they might be surviving, but they're not thriving. And there might not even be surviving. They literally might be not able to, if they didn't have the creative outlet. So we're way past that now. But anyway, so in my own life, I had to just pull back and get married. And I was like, sort of looked at my marriage as like, I need to produce my life. I need to like see how to get married. And so made it happen, Baruch Hashem, and then moved to Canada.
Is your husband someone interested in the arts as well? How did you find a compatible mate?
Right. I had to accept the fact that I have this background, and if someone doesn't understand the arts, it wouldn't be a good match. I did have a date, and it was like so clear, right? Someone said like, oh, well, I think musical theater is stupid or something. And I
check, please.
That would be such a good match. So I had this realization that like I needed to be clear about what I was looking for. And so, and also I'm sort of an academic. This is just, anecdotally how I was looking for a husband is, there's these databases of, and I just thought, forget it. I'm never going to use these stupid, databases where they actually, the algorithms, really like whistleblower, the algorithms send men profiles of women by default that are 15 years younger. So they want them, and so they want the men to think that, like, there's a good pool of girls. So the default, I was getting emailed by 60-year-old men, and I just felt like these are stupid databases. But if you actually go in and look and do your own searches, there's a lot of people in the database. So I, put in my search terms, and then, 100 people came up, and I created a folder, and then, right, it's like, I'm looking for articles, I'm doing research. And so I just dump everybody into my folder that I thought was cute and had something to do with the arts. So that was like my only qualifications was, I like what you look like, and you have something to do with the arts. And then I put them in my folder, and then I could go through my folder and sort of look, and star and look at the people that I wanted to, actually get back, right. So, and I would open each email. So this was like, I was like the initiator, and I would say, you look interesting. Let me know if you know what I mean? Like, give me a call if you're interested. And I literally at that point had like probably everybody that I wrote to, unless they were already married, because it was a profile from 3 years earlier, said, let's have a date. And I literally had like a Sundays where it was like 2:00 with Greg and 8:00 with Steve. And, it was just like sort of overload. So, but then this guy calls from Canada, and he was this Bezrizos type of guy, and he had already bought his ticket, and then he called me. So the truth is, it went through a friend, and my friend called me, and, I was like this low budget artist, directing a play and for a middle school. So the play was like that night, and my friend called me from Canada, but I have to quickly scramble to get any call from Canada or whatever. She called me over the weekend. She said, when are you available? I said, I'm doing a play. It's Monday. So technically I'd be available for a date on Tuesday. So she calls him back and says, she was in Canada. So I had dropped for him. I had said, oh, I have a friend in Canada, if you know this couple. And so he called them, and Basov, he bought his ticket before he called me. And I'm run to get this call because it's from Canada, and I don't have Canada minutes. And so, but it's this guy, and he says, I'm coming tomorrow for a date. And I said, like, I'm just not available, right? Like, I can't put another date on my plate right now. Like, why don't you call me in 2 weeks? And he's like, I already bought my ticket. And I said, oh, if you already bought your ticket, fine. We'll meet tomorrow. So that was how he sort of like slid in. And I literally had to cancel other dates, that had already been set up. And so it moved quickly, and, kids. And then I secretly hoped, in terms of getting back to ATARA, that someone would sort of like jump in and take leadership. But in the end, there was a new surge of interest, right? There was a few years where you have to just let the community happen, right? Like, let people do their thing. We don't need to like give that encouragement and spark anymore, because people are now off and running and doing and creating. And, people were creating camps and schools. And it's like, you need to give people the time to have the space to do their own thing. So then a few years later, there was really a new interest and a new surge in what we need to get together. We need to be a community. And so then there was like a sort of second wave. And that's where we are now is, then there was COVID. Our conference from 2020 was canceled, but it's like, at this point, what are the new needs? I would say having a conference, now people are connected, right? People are more connected than ever. There's more happening than ever. And so now I sort of did the same thing that I did in the beginning, which I just brought people together. I just made something called the forum, and I just like brought people from the community together to say, what are the needs? What are you doing? Who are you? And where are you? And would you need now from an arts community? And is it necessarily a conference, or is it something different? And so that sort of gave us direction for where we are now.
So tell me a little bit about, what are you doing now? And also, how did you get connected with the OU and the whole Impact Accelerator? How did that change the profile of what you're able to do?
So I definitely am so glad you brought that up, because I want to make sure to give a shout out. So this is one of the most game-changing and brilliant programs, I think, in the Jewish world, because the OU can't do everything, right? Like, if they were to say they can't, at a certain point, an organization needs to say, we need to do certain things really well. And so instead they said, let's support other people who are already doing important work that is like sort of niche, and just help them with what they need in terms of having a good potential, but not having the business infrastructure. And that's where we were really, I wouldn't say that we weren't a good candidate. We were a pretty good candidate in the sense that we had this track record of success, a community of need of people, and a growing community. I think the most significant thing is that, every camp that is training girls, and every new generation of girls that is being told, you can do this, you have talent, why don't you develop your talent? In 5 years from now, there's going to be 50 new singer-songwriters, 100 new singer-songwriters, because there's a dance school there's a school training girls in voice in Israel, in LA, in Chicago, in, all the camps, right? So where are these girls going to be in 5 and 10 years? So the community is only going to expand. And, how do we say, how can we be helpful as a resource to the community of religious artists if there is a need? And the OU gave us strategic business skills. I mean, I didn't fundraise because I didn't know how, and I didn't fundraise for my own salary. So this was just a side hustle. This was just because of a need, right? I was sort of motivated by the pain point, by the need. But now there's sort of like no longer a need, but there's a need for infrastructure, but that's a skill set that I don't necessarily have to just fundraise and get enough to pay a salary and get a social media professional and get right. Like, there are real needs to get the word out, to reach people, whatever it is, to do the things that we need to do, whether it's programming or education or advocacy for the arts or helping. So the big need right now that the artists basically, settled on is the big majority said, we want money. Right now we have our talent and you gave us encouragement and we have what we have and we're good at what we do, but no one wants to pay us. They want to take our art and donate it to tzedakah, and the artist doesn't get paid, right? So like there's no structure for paying artists and valuing artists. And we're going to pay a graphic designer, but the performer is expected to donate their talent, and they spend lots of hours of time practicing and perfecting that talent that brings joy and brings inspiration and brings education, right? Like the arts really have this power at their languages. You can, you walk out of a Broadway show, Sweeney Todd about, killing people, and you're like, yeah, kill, right? You're singing and dancing and full of joy about like the craziest subjects. So you can take Torah and Jewish history, and those are the subjects of musical theater. And then you're like, wow, I just learned about, right? Why was Hamilton so successful? Because people appreciated that they could, instead of having to read a 600-page textbook, they could get a 2-hour uplifting music and dance experience and learn the same information. And so that it's this powerful educational tool. So just having an understanding of the power and the potential of the arts, I feel like is just sort of like an advocacy point. So thank you for anybody who's listening. I'm sure this opportunity is like, sort of gets that word out. So yeah, so that's where we are now, is trying to find ways to bridge that gap for the artist in terms of creating job opportunities. How would that work? The shuls and schools don't want to pay a lot, but they should pay something, right? Even if it's $100, $200, to somehow find this low budget model where, we could even start with emerging artists, right? Because the artists that are already developed, they want more, and so they can be sort of reserved for like the big event, that has $1,000 to pay, or, paying the talent. But so just to try to create models that could be helpful for the artists moving forward.
What do you feel like you've learned about yourself through this whole growth process, working with the OU, developing these different facets of the business? How has it impacted or changed you?
So this woman, Esther Leia Marchette, who's my sort of partner in Boston, she keeps saying to me, it's so amazing to see how you've changed from this program. And to me, I don't think that I've per se changed. It's just that this was another academic endeavor, right? Here was classes that I could learn in fundraising and business structure and have mentors this was education I'm good at, right? Like I got that behind my belt. I am way overeducated. And so, to me, this was just an expose to taking a course in all the subject matter that had been missing for me in terms of trying to be a legitimate established organization. Now, I wouldn't say that it changes overnight. I'm not going to say that it's a magic pill that just because you attend a class, therefore your organization suddenly gets $100,000. And suddenly you hire a director because you took a class. Really, that's not realistic in reality. So I did take the class and I feel empowered and I feel knowledgeable. And so I feel that given time, I'll be able to apply what I've learned in a realistic timetable, but it's given me the confidence and the vision that before I just didn't even know that it was possible. So here I can see the goal and I can see the steps that are needed to achieve it. And they gave me that. And so to any degree that there is success is completely based on the education that I got from them, right? Even if it doesn't happen for 5 years, they are responsible for that development and that growth, even in 5 years from now. And that's why I say it's the most powerful, incredible initiative right now in the Jewish world, because they're taking everybody in my cohort, right? We're all at this critical juncture where we don't know what to do with what we've created. We had this vision, we created something, and now we're the visionaries, but we don't have MBAs. And so how are we supposed to create something real out of a good idea? So we have this community and this good idea, but how do we make it sustainable? And so that's the OU. Really, they're doing, it's way more than just ATARA. They're helping every single cohort, and even people they don't choose. The process of applying is so involved in thinking about your organization and where you're going that I'm sure people who even aren't selected gain from the whole process of application. So it's phenomenal what they're doing. If you have money, give it to them. Just kidding. Give it to us. Just kidding. I don't know.
Finally, Miriam, if you have a message for young women or girls out there who are artistically inclined, whatever specific area that might be, what is your message for them now in 2022, looking out to those girls today let's say specifically in the Orthodox community who are growing up that have talent or have interests in the arts, performing arts, and so forth?
So 2 things. On the one hand, I want to give a message to the girls, which is just go for it. You have talent. Hashem created the world. Hashem created you with his talent. This is special. This is different. This is, we don't have prophecy right now in this generation, but who knows if prophecy didn't convert to artistic talent, right? That the artists can see what isn't there. You are creating something that is new, that is coming from your soul, and your soul is connected to Hashem. You are davening and learning Torah. Anything you produce is going to impact, right? Anybody who consumes it is going to be changed. The arts change people. You look at something, it changes your perspective. You see meaning the consumer, that you listen to a song and it could heal you. You could be sad and you could listen to a music that could change your day, that could change your life. And you go to see theater and you learn about something you didn't know. You hear a perspective that you didn't hear before, and you are able to absorb it because it was not didactic. The arts are such a powerful language, each one individually, and they speak louder than words alone because they touch your soul as well. Music touches you emotionally, in addition to the intellectual impact of the words, that you're reading on a page or something. But if you set it to music, right, or you dance is like a moving art. The body is the paintbrush. It's lifting the goof off the ground towards heaven. There is nothing else that does that. it is this art form that is just misunderstood, right? Because we think that the spirit is holy, but the body is somehow bad. But the body is the house for the soul. And the body in itself, if used properly, it can be beautiful and it can really uplift people. And we do have these lessons for Simchas Torah, right? Like, that joy, right? Like how have we lost the idea that Simcha is a Torah value, right? So all of these combined, right, these messages that I'm sort of saying is that the arts are so important to Judaism, and not to feel that as an artist, that you are on the fringe, that you are somehow not fitting in or that not appreciated. Hashem gave you something that is a gift, that is a piece of gold that you can share with others, and your voice should be cultivated. You need to work hard. Just like you study accounting, you need to study voice. You need to put it in, right? Like you need to put in the time. You need to rehearse. You need to look at your gift as a serious ability, talent that needs to be maximized to its full potential, and don't just say, oh, it's just a side gig, right? Like if you have something that can change people's lives and that's your unique gift, then you need to take it seriously and you need to make it the best that you can make it so that you can inspire more people. So that basically the message to the girls is it needs to be taken seriously and it has an impact on the world. It will change the world. It will change the community. It will change people's lives. It will make the world a more spiritual place because we're bringing spirituality into the world through these powerful languages. It will bring Torah values into the world in ways that are enjoyable, and people can love Torah and learn Torah in such enjoyable ways. Who knows, it's like people will start to see Torah in such positive ways and enjoy, right? People that are not religious, don't have to look at Orthodoxy as like ripping toilet paper. It's a doorway into Shabbat, right? Or whatever it is for people. It doesn't have to be about Torah, right? It could just be about your soul and your self-expression, and also just for your own health. If someone is good at math and they were literally told math is not accepted in Judaism, we don't like math, right? You cannot do math. Then all those people that had the potential to be accountants and actuaries and math teachers, their soul would be
stilted,
right? Like stifled. And so just having that outlet. So the other message though that I have is for people who are not artists, who don't understand. And I would say that the percentage of artists and non-artists is just from statistics, 15% are gifted and innovative abilities. And then literally like closer to 7 or 8% of the population is really award-winning talent, like really talented. And then only 3% is really like gifted, like really, very top. So that's sort of the statistics. So that's 85%. And let's say that the bottom 15% really just don't get it at all. But then the middle, the bell curve, like there's another like sort of 60% in there or 70% that it could go either way, right? Maybe they'll go to a show, maybe they'll do their laundry, maybe they'll appreciate, maybe they won't appreciate, that they can be convinced. And I just feel like sort of speaking to that population, that understanding that this is also from research, and eventually I actually got a school administration degree and studied creative thinking and creative students in Orthodoxy. What I found I can sort of add to the message that I have for the non-artists is understanding that it's not just a stage. You don't just give someone a microphone and their problems are solved, or let them play the violin and their problems are solved in Orthodoxy, or, let them do painting. There are multiple points of encounter with Orthodoxy because as a creative thinker, right, an artist also has a disposition towards creative thinking. And they're going to be more curious, have more questions, not be a non-conform, like predispositions to non-conformity, autonomy, the need for autonomy, right? So like there's certain predispositions that are chemically wired into the brain and into the personality, the creative personality. And, there's multiple studies on, learning about this. And one of them is actually, so my study was about spirituality and the need for deep spirituality and deep emotional connection and meaning for artists. And so if you have someone who is creative, they have this whole other world, this whole other package that comes along with them that is going to include, and right, so you have these kids that are being potentially, right, maybe not so much anymore, but with the wrong educator, kicked out of class for asking the wrong questions. And they are sincerely asking questions because they are sincerely curious and they are sincerely not trying to hurt anyone or, and cause disruption in the class. But if they're told, you have to do this, right? And they say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do it that way or something. And because it's just hardwired, and the teacher and the administrators and the parents don't understand the psychological needs of this population, then these kids are not even making it to middle school. I mean, literally the families that I know of artists, their kids, I mean, this is people that are involved in ATARA or professional artists, and their kids, 5 out of 6, right? Let's say like I interviewed, 6 families, 5 out of 6. So one is a really strong mother who's like, I'm going to give my kid everything that she needs. And I'm going to be really supportive and force her to go to the base Jacob and do her homework. And I'm on top of it, right? Like, so that's intervention. Of the other families, 5 out of 6, the kids are already in public school. They just say like, my needs aren't getting met. I'm a kid and my basic needs aren't getting met. My emotional needs aren't getting met. Right. So they see that you can be an artist and you can paint and they have this talent, but their emotional needs aren't being met. And by middle school, I mean, that's crazy. And some of them are literally defecting, and they're super talented. And this was what motivated my research, because I just felt like in the arts community, even with the work of ATARA, I thought, great, we're the magic pill, right? Now you can be an artist and religious. And still people were defecting. And I was involved in this community called Cholent, which sort of, I mean, I don't know if people are already aware of it, but it's really this like, Yiddish speaking, ex-Hasidim community that picks up at 11 p.m. and ends at 4 o'clock in the morning. And it's just get together and talk about intellectual things. It's just open, accepting. And I mean, this guy is the biggest tzaddik, Yitzhak Schoenfeld, he is a tzaddik, he's a gadol hador. He is catching the people that other people aren't catching. He's really catching them. He spends all nights talking people off the ledge of committing suicide. He's saving people's lives. He's creating a community for people that don't have a community and don't want to be judged. It's a complete non-judgment space. And to me, again, like that was just so fascinating, right? Like I was sort of like this anthropologist, this is a Judaism that I love. This non-interesting people, artistically talented, spiritually deep, questioning and non-judgment, right? I just gravitated towards this. So I was becoming more religious, but I felt my happy place was this community, because people were questioning and open and non-judging and just being and so deep. And I felt like these were the deepest, most intelligent, most spiritually evolved, and also artistically talented, right? Like every week there's some sort of artistic performance or scholarly presentation. And that was like the model where he starts the night with some sort of performance or presentation that then gets people talking. So it was social, but it was intellectual. But meanwhile, it was a community of artists and scholars and intellectuals and spiritual, inspirational type people that were all not religiously, right? Like they weren't religiously observant. They weren't associating with organized religion. And I just felt like, wow, there's something happening here. There's a connection between deep spirituality and creativity and going off the derech, and it needs to be addressed. And I did find that basically this is, part of this picture of the artist and the artistic personality is that it comes with a whole host of, psychological and emotional needs that may or may not be addressed. So there could be a great teacher, a great mentor, a great intervention, right? A program, someone might get what they need from whatever it is that is already going on. But I think that it's also a really great need in terms of advocating to the community, the great need for understanding creative people.
It's a fascinating diagnosis, and thank you for doing your part to resolve some of these challenges and help people bring out their potential and find pathways to God that are within the structure of Torah living, and yet that fully actualize their souls. So I think it's a really powerful mission that you're on. Miriam Leah, where can people learn about ATARA and find it online and so forth?
So it's artsandtorah.org, ARTSANDTORAH.org. But also come with a spirit of non-judgment. We are sort of like still volunteers, and we have our website, but I'm sure it needs to be updated. So there's that, and I do have like static lists of where to find camps and songwriters, and we're going to be updating the songwriters because now there's just so much more of a community of songwriters growing. So that needs to be updated. But if you want looking for arts camps or art school seminaries that focus on the arts, or so we have the static lists, and we have bios of artists that were previously involved in conferences, and so you sort of get a sense of like the background and the experience and the artists that have been involved. But we also have this newsletter, so every month I try, it's sort of like every 4 to 6 weeks, or when there's things really happening. It's a combination of what's happening, so it might not all be where you are. If you live in Edison, New Jersey, number one, there might be some things in the New York area, but one might be in Brooklyn, and one might be in who knows where. And but there also might be things in Israel or things in Chicago or LA. So you're not necessarily going to attend every event, but some of them are on Zoom. But it's nice to know that they are happening and to be connected. And then also it's a list of new releases, like sort of news, look at all of these new songs by Jewish women. So occasionally there is something that's men only, and I include that because I feel like it's still sort of within the spirit, but predominantly, the need, right? Men who are in music can be hired for weddings and, simchas, right? Like they can make their albums and be sold widely. And it's harder for female singer-songwriters and musicians. So the community of women need more support. So the newsletter, you can subscribe on the website. Especially if you're an artist. Obviously you can get in touch. If you're a creative or an artist, there's points of interaction. And of course, if you want to donate, we'll happily put that to good use in helping people that aren't working as accountants, right? These are people that are gifted in an area that isn't bringing in a lot of money. So to a certain degree, there is, not all artists are starving, but it's conceptually, we're not working as lawyers. It's hard to have every gift in the world.
Everyone has to do their part.
Talent, but we need other people's money.
There we go. Perfect way to end a Jewish podcast. Miriam Leah Gamliel from ATARA, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I happen to tell you that you just have the best. Podcasts are incredible because you just go in depth, but I'm really loving every one of yours. And I've learned so much about so many people. So I thank you for your work. You are just brilliant and phenomenal in the way that you're contributing to the Jewish people as well.
Thank you so much. That's an even better way to end a podcast. You one-upped yourself. There we go. Miriam Leah Gamliel from ATARA, thank you for joining us.
This has been Ari Koretsky on Jews You Should Know. Please visit us at JewsYouShouldKnow.com and subscribe at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you consume podcasts. Find us on social media at Jews You Should Know. If you'd like to become a supporter of this podcast, we would greatly appreciate that, and you can do so by visiting patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Jews You Should Know. Finally, if you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review so that we can continue to grow and introduce many more people to Jews You Should Know.